Thank you for your patience. My name is Andy Higginbottom. I was the co-prosecutor at the Bremen and at the Berlin Permanent People's Tribunal. There were two previous sessions of this tribunal. The first, which took place in January 2010, very shortly after Mullaikal, determined that the government of Sri Lanka had committed war crimes and crimes against humanity. The Bremen Tribunal stands out for two reasons. The first is, given the failure of the United Nations to do justice for Tamils, it was the first international body, as far as I'm aware, to make clear that a genocide is taking place against Tamils in Sri Lanka, and that this is an ongoing genocide. The second important decision, which the verdict came to in 2013, is that the United Kingdom, including its politicians, that is, and its government, are complicit in genocide and therefore have committed crimes against humanity. And the other decision, which was less clear, was that other powers had played a role, but the evidence to the tribunal wasn't sufficient to make a determination. The Berlin Tribunal, therefore, was the third session, already on the basis that a genocide was taking place. The panel of judges, as you can see here, come from social movements all over the world, but especially indigenous peoples from Latin America, who many you might want to think might regard as your equivalents in a way in terms of oppressed peoples, nations without a state around the world. The big question which the Berlin Tribunal had to answer was how comes during the peace process 2002-2006 the European Union and United States apparently supported peace after the fact that the LTTE had in effect fought the Sri Lankan state to a standstill and the peace process was necessary. How comes the outcome of that supposed peace process was a restarting of the genocide? And in particular, the result of the restarting of the genocide fell very conveniently into the strategic interest of the United States, and in particular its military interest from Trincomalee Harbour controlling the whole of the Indian Ocean region. So the question fundamentally, which the Berlin Tribunal looked at, is the question of framing narrative. What is the basic understanding that we have of what has taken place to the Elam Tamil people? And in particular, the Bremen Tribunal had already identified that the United Kingdom, United States are complicit in genocide. The Berlin Tribunal took this one step further. And the basic premise of the Berlin Tribunal was, on the evidence it received, was that there was a genuine possibility of peace in the 2002-2006 period, but it was the strategy and the policy of the UK and the US to break the peace, to return the country to war. And this constitutes a crime not only of genocide, but a crime against peace. And this is de facto situation where Elam Tamil existed. Tamil Elam existed in the Vani region, a de facto state which the policy of the US and UK were intent to destroy. So this is the framing narrative, and they started this already in 2003 by attacking the status of the LTTE in the negotiations with the Sri Lankan state, and they continued it ever since the massacre as well. Now the narrative which is given to justify the destruction of the formative and really existing independent Tamil Elam, and the justification is really clear, that this was a war against the terrorist organisation, the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Elam. The Berlin Tribunal completely disputes this narrative and says it is false. It is false because, in fact, it was the Bani region and the formative Tamil Elam state which was the major protection for Tamil people against genocide. So destroying the LTTE was the pathway to committing the genocide. So this is the framing narrative with which the Berlin Tribunal made its decisions. It is also clear that the Western powers use the question of terrorism and allegations against the Liberation Tigers in order to justify destruction of the Elam Tamil nation. It is a justification for genocide by displacing what the central point of the conflict was. And the central point was and continues to be the right of the Tamil people to self-determination, including an independent Tamil Elam. So Tamil Elam was a liberated territory which was destroyed, and the destruction started during the peace process. The criminalization of Elam Tamils, we've heard about Prevention of Terrorism Act in Sri Lanka, but it is clear that LTT was banned under the Prevention of Terrorism Act here in the UK, and later on in Germany and the European Union. This banning of the LTTE is part of the genocidal process. I just want to comment, my main area of research has already been reported is in Colombia. And in the case of Colombia, the United States took a decision in June 2001 to allow an all-out war with massive civilian casualties in Colombia. They made a very similar decision about the same time in relation to Sri Lanka as well. The great powers gave the green light for a total war strategy to destroy the LTTE no matter what. And the no matter what was clearly tens of thousands of people being killed. So the first accusation of the Berlin Tribunal is that the United States is primarily responsible for the genocide. And this is framed in terms of not only the Genocide Convention of 1948, but what is called the crime against peace. And it comes from the same period. You will remember the Nuremberg Tribunal putting on trial the leadership of Nazis in Germany, and the charges against them were actually that their invasion of other countries was a crime against peace. And this crime has never been played at the foot of the imperialist powers. But in fact, they themselves do this on a regular basis, including the destruction of a genuine peace, possibility of a genuine peace in Sri Lanka was a crime against peace. That is removing any possible reconciliation, and this is the charge. And it paved the way for a total war against the Tamil nation in very similar terms to what the United States had done in Central America against indigenous people, where 250,000 indigenous people were massacred at Guatemala in particular in a total war strategy. So it is part of the strategy of US imperialism. So what we're saying therefore is this accusation is this strategy was applied to the Tamil people with awful and genocidal consequences. The finding of the judges was that the United States is guilty of both aspects of this crime of aggression against the liberated territory of Tamil Elam. And those two sides are the planning and instigation of its destruction under the banner of counter-terrorism, and secondly, a coordinated and systematic plan to destroy the liberated zones of the north and east. The motive for this crime was strategic. The US had decided to secure undisputed control of the region, to have access to Trincomalee in particular, and this was, if you like, the fundamental motive that Tamil nation was sacrificed to US imperialist interest supported by the UK. The second accusation is, as we've already rightly heard, how failure of the UN Human Rights Council in terms of its resolutions and the process of giving international impunity to the genocide that has taken place and is taking place. So I won't labour this point because it is very well documented. The United States and the UK have used their influence to control the UN process to avoid any recognition of the rights of the Tamil nation. So rights are individual rather than collective, and they're all confined within a framework which is still acceptable to the Western imperial powers. Unfortunately, the so-called non-aligned movement has hardly been any better whatsoever. So Tamil people have had no support from either of the two main state factions operating in the context of the United Nations. The third accusation, and this is the second main theme of the tribunal, after making clear the United States and United Kingdom responsibility for the genocide, the second main area of investigation of the Berlin Tribunal was the situation of women as part of the movement in the liberated territory of Tamil Elam. And the accusation reads as follows, that the US, in seeking to destroy the LTTE, is guilty of violating the rights of Tamil women and their right to be protected from genocide. So clearly the powers acted to destroy the LTTE and the liberated area, and in so doing they also destroyed the advances made by women within the liberated area. The finding is that the powers such as the USA are guilty of violating the rights of the women of Tamil Elam by destroying the LTTE. Now the jury's reasoning on this point is particularly important. Some of the material is fairly well established, but in this case the jury heard from 11 Tamil women, most of whom had been freedom fighters in the LTTE. And it's their evidence which was really central to the Tamil people's story and the findings of the tribunal. And they gave evidence on three main fronts. The first evidence that was given was why women joined the LTT in the first place, why they saw it as being part of their own liberation, that they would be part of a national liberation movement. The second type of experience about which the women spoke was their experience of what it was like in the Vanni region, in the liberated territory before it was destroyed. And a number of obvious themes come up: the better treatment of women, the gender parity which was emerging, the treatment of allegations of rape, and so on. And so overall a positive, not uncritical, but still positive accounts of experience in the Vanni region. Now, of course, then the third main area is the awful story, which is still ongoing, of what's happened to Tamil women after the massacres of 2009, and if you like, the continuing occupation and use of rape in particular as a weapon of war against women. So this is a fundamentally new finding of the tribunal, and it goes against the dominant narrative, which is that Western liberalism will liberate women of poor and oppressed peoples. Rather, it was the agency of the women themselves and of the liberation movement which was central to the movement for women's emancipation. The fourth is also already rightly been reported about the continuing genocide of the Elam Tamils by the Sri Lankan state. Again, the evidence is very well known, very well documented. I'm sure you have family and friends who can pass on all of this all the time. So the genocide is continuing, and the reason for the genocide continuing is the continuing international impunity for the Sri Lankan state, given by the Western powers and in alliance actually with the UN Security Council and UN Human Rights Council as well. The fifth accusation I've already referred to, it was a concrete case that the genocide has an external aspect beyond impunity, which is the persecution of Tamil activists in the diaspora for supporting the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Elam. This, in the accusation, constitutes a continuation of the genocide because it removes any legitimacy of the rights of Tamil people to fight for national liberation. Now, the UK played a central role in this because the UK adopted the same policies the United States, and it acted as the agent within the European Union pushing for a ban on the LTTE. The UK banned the Liberation Tigers early on, and then lobbied, and particularly when it was the presidency of the LTTE, it ensured it enacted the ban and really sort of like pushed other European countries to accept the ban. And the consequence of that was the shift in the position of Germany in particular. Germany had supported the peace process. It had been giving aid after the horrible tsunami and been cooperating with Tamil liberated areas. But after this was pushed through, and in particular even after the massacres took place, that is when Germany started prosecuting Tamil refugees for being criminals for collecting money to liberate their homeland. So the criminalisation accelerated after 2009. And there are now two Tamil brothers fighting a court case where they're refusing to accept that they're criminals for collecting money to be sent back home. And this is an ongoing case in Germany. There is an appeal going on, and we hope you can support it. Lastly, about the effect of the genocide, I've already mentioned US strategy. In 2009, the Muluvaikal massacre took place. In 2010, Hillary Clinton and Obama announced a strategic turn to the Indo-Pacific region based on naval control. And you can see from this map, we used similar material in previous sessions of the tribunal. You can see also from the current war taking place against Palestinian people, how concerned they are about stability of the Middle East. And there are two particular choke points for the export of the world's oil. One is the Straits of Hormuz, which is in the Persian Gulf, and the other Straits of Malacca. And you can see from this map, I hope, that the major sea lanes go so close to Sri Lanka, and it's a point which was made quite rightly in the film, the strategic interest which the great powers have not to allow an independent Tamil Elam to exist on the island of Sri Lanka because of the threat to their interest in controlling the whole region. Those are the two choke points. So the tribunal received this accusation, and it found that the US policy to destroy the LTTE was quite calculated. It was a strategic decision to give the go-ahead to the genocidal massacres in order to secure its own strategic interests. So they subcontracted the massacre to the Sri Lankan state, but it fell very nicely into their hands. And it said, this hearing was in 2022, and it said this is a dire warning. Well, I'm very sorry to say that the dire warning is so true in relation to what's happening to the Palestinian people today. There are so many parallels to the ongoing daily genocide against Palestinian people, from the fact that there's a US aircraft carrier supervising events to the so-called safe havens where people are being sent, and then where they're sent is being bombed by the artillery, by the Air Force, and now by drones as well. There are very, very many parallels between the contemporary daily genocide of Palestinians and the genocide of the Elam Tamils. And I really hope that this point registers in terms of a turn towards international solidarity for the Palestinian people in their time of need. The concluding remarks are ones which I've already mentioned, just to underline them: the importance of countering the terrorism narrative, the role that genocide plays as the absolute oppression of women and caught as victims of the genocide, the international impunity which this genocidal process still enjoys, and we've raised a new degree of guilt of the Western powers, United States and UK, beyond complicity, which is that they committed a crime against peace. They committed a war of aggression against the Tamil Elam, against the Tamil nation. There are further recommendations, central to which is a campaign to unban the LTTE. Also, that the German state drops the charges against the two brothers in Germany. There are also other important lessons learned from the tribunal, in particular the question of how carefully we should support Tamil women who've been through incredibly difficult process personally, and have really been hard for them to tell their story, to tell the truth of their experience of the genocide, before, during and after. And also, by the way, quite a lot of the material came from WikiLeaks. So we want to see Julian Assange not criminalised for bringing out the truth of what the US in particular was up to at the time of Mully Vaikal. Okay. And this is my addition, right? Because as I say, the genocide against the Palestinian people is also ongoing, but has come to a very crucial point to this day. We are now talking about 17 or 18,000 Palestinian people massacred in the last month or so. Imperialism is behind both, and the only way to stop these genocides is to fight against the controlling power of Western imperialism. Thank you.